Welcome to PhD&D on YouTube. I think we're live with Coffee and Campaign Building. This is Coffee and Campaign Building, episode 7, I believe. I've been asked, it's been a request that I number them. And I know a couple of them say returns or Coffee and Campaign Building again. So I'll try to keep them numbered so that if you are watching these later on from the channel, you'll know which ones to watch next. So let me just make sure everything is working here. It looks like it. If you have never been a part of Coffee and Campaign Building before, it is a live world building video. And what I mean by that is I'm going to do some world building for my newest setting, the setting that I'm working on, I guess. And I'm just going to do that while talking to all of you. And if you have questions, I will try to answer questions. But it's just a chance for you to see somebody else's world building methods, because with all the world building series out there, you can get all the tips and advice you want, but I think it'll help as much or more to actually see it happening, to actually see the world building in progress. And the other purpose of this series, Coffee and Campaign Building, is to get yourself a nice drink of choice, whether it's coffee, tea, creative juices for you. And grab that drink, relax. And the biggest part of this that I hope is happening is that while we are together and while I'm world building on here, I want you to do the same at home. So grab a notebook, grab a pen or a pencil, open up a Word document, a Google Doc, whatever you want. But I'd really like for you to get some world building at the same time, even if it's just a tiny thing and you don't even know what setting you'll use it in. If you actually do this at the same time as I do, I think you'll get a lot more out of it. So I think everything's good. If you're having any technical difficulties, please let me know. The best way is on Facebook, or if you enter the Q&A app. I've activated the question and answer app with this video. If you leave a comment, it's a lot harder for me to tell. I'm refreshing the comments page when I can, but they don't always show up. So, yeah. Just a second here. So, you can ask questions. You can tweet at PhD&D on Twitter, and I'll get it that way. You can comment on the Facebook status for this event, or enter the Q&A app and ask your question there. But yeah, like I said, in the comments, it's just a lot harder for me to find your question. So I'm trying to get there, trying to get that to happen, but we will see. So anyways, what's going to be included in this video? Some live world building. Like I said, I'm going to start off by talking about my new campaign setting that I'm working on, go into the most detail that I've gone into on that setting, just to really let you know where those ideas came from. And then when we actually get into a little bit of the world building after that, you can see, why things are the way they are. This whole broadcast should last around an hour, hour and a half tops. I'm in no hurry here, so. But yeah, if you have technical difficulties, let me know. It's a little laggy on my screen. So my first couple of coffee and campaign building videos were about my setting called AIR, A-E-R. And that was a good setting. Those videos show you kind of how I built that setting. But this video will start the series, or start all of the future coffee and campaign building videos for the near future, on a setting called Candelure. And it is a setting, so let's start with the name. For the longest time, I didn't have a name for it. And the biggest thing you got to remember is not to stress about naming things, which I used to do, but I watched Brandon Sanderson who writes, oh, he wrote like Mistborn, and I've got some of his books, Words of Radiance. There's another one. Anyways, he does some lectures on YouTube about writing fantasy and science fiction, and he drives home the point that you shouldn't waste any time or stress on names because they're very easy to figure out. A lot of those names will come to you. This one, I always thought in Forgotten Realms, Candlekeep was a really cool just word. Always liked that and wanted something like it. And at the same time, my setting is partially influenced, from the game Reckoning, Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning. And I kind of combined Candlekeep, Amalur, so that's where the name came from. But the setting, and it's kind of a mash of a bunch of different settings, or a mix-up of a bunch of different influences anyways. I'll show you the books right here that influenced it. These are the core books. Those are not it. So number one of the first, so setting guides. I'm a big fan of setting guides for anything. I like looking through how a setting is presented. And the first one I got was The World of Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time. I have not read that series yet. I would like to start it. But this book, and I have the first book in that series, but this is a guide kind of to the whole setting, and just seeing how it was laid out, seeing the different histories, the different pictures, gave me inspiration on how to start putting my setting together. That was the first book that I got. They kind of showed me what areas I need to look at, particularly what areas of history are interesting, what areas of the setting come across as the most interesting. And then I picked up, as you all know, I did a review on Elminster's Guide to the Forgotten Realms. This book is amazing. Go watch that video if you want to know more about it. A lot of people have bought this book after seeing that video, and I hope they're satisfied. But that book showed me the amount of detail that you can go into with certain things that still add a lot to the setting and to the story. Because people always say you don't need to waste time on a lot of the little details. But if you like to, that book shows you just how cool that can be. He goes into detail on how books are mass produced, what types of books, it's talking about in different areas. It's amazing. So that really showed me the amount of detail that I wanted to get into, at least a little bit in each area of Candelure. The next book, which heavily influenced the amount of fantasy, my setting Air had a little lower fantasy, you might say, than previous campaigns. And then I got this, and I kind of got into the lore of World of Warcraft. This is it doesn't have the dust cover on it, Ultimate Visual Guide to the World of Warcraft. This book is beautiful, number one, but you can see how it's laid out. The Council of the Three Hammers, I don't even know what that is, but talks about like the Third War. It goes through these ancient ages and this great amount of fantasy, how the cosmology affects the history of the setting and so on and so forth. So I took heavily from that influence into Candelure, which you're going to see here in just a few minutes. And the last book that I just got for Christmas and that I have yet to really dive into, I've read the first part of it, is George Martin's The World of Ice and Fire. It's awesome. He's a fantastic writer. I've read all the books in that series so far, and his world is just really, really cool. So after the World of Warcraft book kind of threw everything clear up in the air, super high fantasy, tons of magic, almost overboard, this book kind of grounded me a little bit. It's like, hey, don't go too far overboard here. Bring everything back, even it out, so it makes sense. Don't use so much magic and so much fantasy because you're going to lose control. So this grounded me. It was kind of a process, those 4 books, but I'm still reading them, still getting inspiration from them, and so that's where I'm at. Candelure, though, let's talk about the actual setting. I will try to get a map up here for you to show you the latest. Okay, we'll get a screen share going in a second, but the actual setting itself is two continents, basically, a couple of islands, not a lot of island chains or anything like that. But the first, Candelure, the actual Candelure continent, is kind of an X shape, as you will see. And then the other one, the Arali Dominions, or also known as the Forgotten Lands, is just a kind of a vertical continent straight next to that one. So let me get the screen share up. Okay, so hopefully you're still with me. So this is Candelure. This is the base map. I do a lot of different maps when making a world, and I'm going to show you those and show you how you can do a lot of different maps from just making one. Because I only made, well, this is the revised map, I guess. So once you have your final map, you can do a lot with it to make a bunch of different types of maps for your world. But you'll see over here, if you can see the cursor, how this is kind of an X shape. That's Candelure, and then over here you've got the Arali Dominions, also known as the Forgotten Lands. Two islands here, an island over there, and there could be a small sprinkling of smaller islands, but we'll find out as the campaign goes on. This area, this big kind of, it's not really an inland sea since the water actually comes all the way through, but that is called the Vega K, and that is a large body of water, a big historical thing for this area. So a lot's going to go on around there. But I basically use a giant list of brainstorming ideas, and I come up with a lot of cool words, cool names, cool ideas that I want. And I've done this in previous videos, talked about it, where then once I actually make the setting, I go back to that list and I pull from it. So basically I wanted some cool name for like the coast. There's a coast in Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning, and now I've just completely lost the name. Yeah, anyways, it's the Kaled Coast, I think is what it's called. Anyways, it was a cool idea to me. I can't even explain why on a lot of these, but I was like, oh, I want something like that. And so then I went to my list, I put down, some type of coast. I think I wrote blank coast. Then later on, I had a bunch of things, and you hear about the cradle of civilization, which is an area of the world, and that was a really, really just cool phrase. So I wrote that down. I was like, okay, I want something like this. And then they were next to each other, and so I got the cradled coast, and it kind of makes sense for the coast, anyways. For this one, this side, the Candelure side, is referred to as the cradled coast, and it is kind of cradled in there. But that's basically how I came up with the name for that. So let me stop the screen share. You've got a reference at least for what the map looks like, and I've got a couple other maps here to kind of show you. So I like to draw maps. If you hand draw your maps, you can do this method. It's very easy. If you use computers or if you use software, it's probably even easier, and there's probably other methods to do this, but I wouldn't know them. I've tried a few types of software. I backed World Spinner, so we'll see how that turns out on Kickstarter. But I keep going back to liking to draw maps, and I think my maps improve. I am by no means an expert cartographer at all. I follow a lot of techniques from other people on YouTube, and I draw a lot of maps because practice is what's going to actually make you better at them. So I drew that map. It looked a lot different. Candelure looked a lot different. It had the same general shape, and I'm going to see if I still have it here. Had the same general shape as it does now, but yep, there it is. Okay, so we'll put them side by side so you can see. This is what it used to look like. You can see how there's still kind of that X on this side. And then I revised it to kind of look like this. So you see how I kind of made finer details. There's still that canyon down in this corner in this one. And then how I recreated and still put that canyon down in this corner, but just a different drawing technique. So it's the same general shape, but a lot of finer details, a lot of detail added, basically. Changed up some of the rivers, but so I draw the first map. I revised that map into what I showed you on the screen share. And from that, I scan it into my computer. If you don't have a scanner, but you have a smartphone, you could take a picture and put it on your computer that way. Basically get it onto a computer. And from there, if you have a decent printer, color printer, you can, even black and white, you just print copies of it to make other maps. That way your original hand-drawn map can stay the same, because it's hard to fit everything you want on one map, like roads, names of places, trade routes, all that. I can't even really fit names. I'm not good at that. And so I print off a bunch of different maps. So I printed off, this one is an example of kingdoms. And I shared this on the Facebook page once. Each of these outlined areas is a kingdom. So the purple down here is Aldesta. Over here is Kindarthane. Up here is Aramanthir. And then Alheim. Those were the 4 original kingdoms. Then I started to realize that I wanted more than just 4 kingdoms. This open area in the middle was referred to as the heart of Kandalore. It's this open area where no kingdom actually claims it, and they can all travel through there to one another, so on and so forth. But you'll note 3 smaller kingdoms that are newer on the historical timeline across here. So you have Amastir, you have Stormfall is the kingdom here, and then I've renamed this one, and I forgot the new name. So once I remember that, I will tell you. Oh, it's Arathel. Arathel is the new name of that one. So I make a kingdom map, just so you know where the borders are. And you'll notice you can't really see it on this, but they're all along like natural borders, like on a river or along a mountain or a forest line, because that is usually how borders are determined. Then, with the new Dungeon Master's Guide, which I always have by, because it's got some really good tips on map making, on working on your setting, I was able to go to a website and print, or basically create, hex paper. I don't know if you can see them. As you get really close there, you can see that there's tiny hexes. And this was the, I think, 5 hexes per inch that they recommend in the DMG. So I'm going to try to stick with that on all my maps and then just scale them differently. I guess I zoom in and do smaller regional maps. But what I did was I printed that hex paper, put it back in the printer, and then I just printed my map on that sheet of paper. And then you've got yourself a perfectly hexed setting map without having to draw the original on hex paper, which bugs me because the lines, they distract me. I want to follow those lines usually. So I like to draw on a blank canvas and then just print it onto one of these. Okay, let me check real quick on the questions before we move on. Again, if you have questions, try to put them, if you can, try to put them in the Q&A app, because I can't, for some reason the comments are not loading. Yeah, the actual comments are not loading on the video. So if you're commenting there, just go ahead and send me a tweet at PhD&D, or on the Facebook page, PhD&D, send me something there, because I'm not seeing any YouTube comments for some reason. Maybe they'll show up. We'll see. Here's an idea. Got it. Thanks for bearing with me here. Okay, so I've only got a couple of comments on the video that I'm seeing, but I'm seeing them now. That's the big thing. Okay, we do have a question in the Q&A app. Are you focusing on any one specific race, or are many represented? Like how many, like how in some settings, elves or humans are the focus? Excellent question. It applies. That was from Jordan Nipper, by the way. So focusing, this setting does not focus on any one race. My last setting, air, focused, it was heavily divided, like the kingdoms were divided by race almost. And it didn't, and it was 99% human, I should say, by the way. And I made a note that in my next setting, I didn't want that. I didn't want things separated just by race. I wanted kingdoms of just groups of people of different races all coming together to make a kingdom. And it wasn't like all the dragonborn in charge or all the dwarves in charge. And then I started Candelure and I didn't remember that little note. And so I made the original 4 kingdoms that I showed you on the map earlier in this video. Those 4 outer kingdoms, and they were, for the most part, they're pretty separated by race. Alheim is dwarves and men, so it's 2 races, I guess. Aramanthir would be the only one that's not. It was humans, dragonborn, tiefling, and a smattering of others. Aldesta, that by the canyons on the map, was all gnomes for the most part, and then Kendarathane was all elves. So it was very separated. And then I came across my old notes where it said, make kingdoms not separated by race. That was partially the decision to add the 3 new ones. Out of those 3 new ones, one of them is heavily elves because of part of the history, but the other 2 are actually full of humans, halflings. I should say this setting has all the core races. At first, I was going to say no halflings. I didn't want them, but I put them back in. They're not going to play a major role, but they're around. They don't really have their own shire area, but they exist. They're around. If I had to say that a race played a more prominent role, it would be the gnomes in this one. And you're looking at more like tinker gnomes. If you've played Kingdoms of Amalur, the gnomes that you meet in Odessa, I think, those type of gnomes are what you're going to find in this setting. Not so much like 4th edition did something weird with gnomes, I think, where they were like this weird little forest sprite thing, like a weird garden gnome almost. I didn't like that at all. I like the idea of like tinker gnomes. Gnomes are heavily advanced in technology, and so the big focus on them in this setting is they're more progressive with technology. And since they're so progressive, they're actually the only civilization in Candelure that has progressed close to what could be called a democracy. They're on like they live in like a budding like republic, or a budding democracy is what I call it. They basically run like a republic right now. So the people have a voice. It's not run by a king or a kingdom like a lot of the other places. And so if I had to say that one race was represented more than I have previously ever, it'd be gnomes, the tinker gnomes. And yeah, but they're not represented heavily, because that's really the only area you find them in. You find like trades guys all over, but that's kind of their one area. So focus more on them than I have in the past, but no, this setting does not have one particular race that's focused on. So thanks, that was a great question, by the way. So kind of back to the maps. So I showed you the gridded map, And the next one would be, so this one here, you can't really tell. You see little dots? That's city locations. So after I've made a bunch of cities, I go ahead and put the dot on the map so I know exactly where they are. A lot of these maps, since I can just print them off, they don't have to be real pretty. I mean, I don't have to have fancy writings for where these things are. This is just a reference for me so that I know exactly where the cities are, exactly where the towns that I've created are, and I've got a spot on the map where they are. But it's not detrimental to my original copy of the map. Now, my original copy, the reason I want to keep it kind of clean is because I want to do some neat things with the players once we actually start the campaign. I want the players to receive copies of the map, but some of them are going to have some subtle differences. And you'll learn this if you get that Elminster's Forgotten Realms book, that maps are kind of rare in this setting like they are there. To where you really have to find somebody good and you really have to pay them to get a copy of a map. And even then, it's not guaranteed to be correct. So I don't want a whole lot of detail on the original map just because I want to make some versions of it that are not entirely correct. You know what I mean? Like I can copy that blank map, print it out, and then I can draw, like, let's say they want a trade map or a road map. They see that there's these roads to get where they want, but they paid the wrong person. They got a bad map, and halfway through their journey, there's no road there. They're lost. They're at the end of this. they're in this jungle or something, and they don't know where they are, which can make for a really interesting time. Getting lost can get extremely interesting. I wrote an article for Theater of the Mind magazine by Captain Gothnog, and my article was on getting lost in a dungeon and how that can be really fun and exciting. But same thing with wilderness. I mean, it can just add a whole different dimension to an adventure. So we'll continue on here. Let me refresh just in case. Okay, we do have a question over on Facebook. Talk about one of your kingdoms in Candelure, which is what we're going to do. I'm going to do that in just a little bit because that's actually going to be one of the exercises in the actual world building I get to here in about 5 minutes. Real quick, let me go over the history of Candelure. I've got it all saved in like Google Drive, so I'm trying to find the right one. So my group, I'm lagging at all. My group uses a shared world. So all the settings that I make or the settings that our other DM makes, they're all in the same world, but there's such a big planet that they're so far away that they're completely different cultures, completely different settings. But we use the same like cosmology and things because it's more interesting. In our big epic tier campaign, those guys can actually be like the historical heroes for new campaigns. So that's the biggest reason. But the cosmology of the world, real quick, is the Dawn War from 4th edition. If you have the Dungeon Master's Guide for 5th edition, there's a list of Dawn War deities in the first chapter. Those are kind of the major deities that we use. So basically, the primordials, the gods, fought over the world. The primordials wanted to destroy it, keep it just chaotic with a bunch of elements. The gods, they liked life. They wanted people to worship them. So the Dawn War happens. The gods win, and that's all I'm going to go into detail there because that doesn't affect this setting or doesn't particularly pertain to this setting. But so then you have the Feywild and the Shadowfell, the echoes. Now, in the Feywild, there's a Court of Stars, which is kind of like the leaders of the Eladrin. And they sent a group of basically guys who they can teleport from one plane to another. It takes a lot of magic and a lot of energy, but they can. So they sent a group of these planeswalkers, and I know that's a Magic the Gathering thing, but I don't exactly know what that is there. Anyways, they sent these planeswalkers over from the Feywild to deal with this dragon. There was this powerful dragon that came about after the Dawn War, and they wanted to take him down. He was in an area near some of their cousins, the Moon Elves, which are my version of Wood Elves. And so they sent these planeswalkers, and all but one of them died. The dragon was way more powerful than they ever imagined. And so his name was Aravir, the planeswalker that survived. So he ran away, but he found the Moon Elves, and he found this font of power called the Dream Tree. Now, these fonts of power came about after the Dawn War. It's big centers of magic, basically. He wanted to find the Dream Tree to get his energy back, to planewalk back to the Feywild. He didn't have enough energy left to go back. So he goes back. And by the way, the Dream Tree is what's called a pillar of creation. There's a lot of these. And a lot of these names, by the way, real quick, a lot of these names are going to change. If I was inspired by something cool that I saw, I threw it in as is, but it's going to change. I'm not just going to steal an idea and not make it my own. So some of these will change. So anyways, he goes back to the Feywild, apologizes to the Court of Stars for leaving his group. The Court of Stars does not blame him. It was their fault. They had underestimated this dragon. And so they basically tell him, go back, settle with the Moon Elves, and we're gonna build strength there because they're near this dragon, and eventually we're gonna take him down. So then it becomes the War of the Fae is what this is called. And basically they reached out to the Kingdom of Alheim, which is the men and dwarves I talked about, said, hey, would you join us in defeating this dragon? The king said no. He said, because Aravir had talked to him, he said, no, you are with the Moon Elves. They are cold-blooded murderers, dark magicians. They will never see an alliance with the kingdom of men and dwarves. So right there, tension. In the coming years, the dragon destroyed like half of the Moon Elf society, and actually a hero from Alheim, from the men and dwarves, named Jericho. And if you follow me on Facebook, you've recognized a magic item. Stay tuned for where that came from. Jericho defeated the dragon. He used what is called the Jericho Blade. It's a magic item I made. The mechanics of it are going to change because I haven't play tested it or anything. It's very powerful. He got this blade. I won't talk about how that he got it right now, but he used it to defeat this dragon. Basically, this blade nullifies magic users. It almost renders them useless, at least against him, whoever wields the blade. So he used the Jericho Blade. The Moon Elves and the Eladrin, they were furious that the Kingdom of Men had this guy who could defeat the dragon and didn't do it for so long. And so they lost like half their kingdom. So they went to war. The War of the Fae is the culmination of their tensions. And the Court of Stars sent invasion forces from the Feywild through what is called the Fey Gate. It's like a magical portal. And to come to find out, there's a secret council in the Court of Stars known as the Star Conclave. They were kind of feeding this tension. They wanted to take over the Kingdom of Men and Dwarves. And so soon, Aravir found out about that. He set up a meeting with Jericho from Alheim, and they actually traveled through the Fey Gate and attacked the Star Conclave, this small group from the Court of Stars. Killed all but one who escaped, and told the Court of Stars, basically, you guys screwed up again. Pull out your forces. This is over. The war is over. And after 6 years of bloodshed, they ended the war that way. The Star Conclave, the last of the Star Conclave, so the guy who got away, disassembled the gate and took it with him, thinking that Aravir could not follow him back to the mortal or the material plane. During the coming years, a Dragonborn invasion happened. They took the gnomes captive, but they went into the Aralai dominions, that other continent, and that's where they lost the war. They were holding off men, dwarves, elves pretty well. They got greedy. They wanted that other continent, which is built right above a massive drow city. So drow raiding parties decimated the Dragonborn. So their invasion didn't last long. Then we get to the War of the Orc. I promise we're almost done with the history, and we'll get to world building here in a second. With the War of the Orc came what's called the Frost. Basically, all the water froze. So now, over on the Aralai dominions and Candelure, there's now basically a land between them. Orcs, thousands of orcs. They attacked the elves. They attacked the men. There were also giants and ogres that came with, because it's a very uncivilized area, the Aralai dominions. And basically, there's war, almost a decade. Jericho and Aravir, who are still alive, defeat Thonzul the Unshaken. He's basically the leader of the orc army. They defeat him. They're able to basically hold out all the good guys, if you want to call them that. However, the orc's lieutenant fled and took a lot of the guys with him. He wandered for years before stumbling across a strange artifact. It led him to a temple underground, and he struck a pact with an ancient demon. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right because it's an actual D&D thing, Yinogu, which is like the Gnoll dude. So basically, Gnolls and orcs team up at this point, and they form what people in Candelure start referring to as the Wild. Groomsh, god of the orcs, gets pissed at these guys because they're teaming with demons, basically abandoning him. And so the orc civilizations are kind of split at this point. The Wild strikes alliances with dragons, which is how kobolds and dragonborn get into their ranks. The final bit of history right here is referred to as the dawn of the Everwar. Now, the last of the Star Conclave, that secret society, he's been hiding for a long time. Some say he's driven mad once he found out that Aravir made it back to the world, and others say he just went mad during isolation. Anyways, he lived in this keep. He studied that Fey Gate forever, and they found notes in his ruined keep along with drawings etched into the stone of basically an eye with references to the Elder. Shortly after this, a young guy rose to power in Aramanthir, one of the northern kingdoms, and basically teamed up with the Wild. Once he became king, he teamed with the opposite side everybody expected it, with the help of the Court of Stars. Aravir, and remember, he's a Ladrin, so he's living a few hundred years. He's old at this point, but still a huge hero. He basically finds out that this leader was actually the demon lord Grazd, if I'm saying that right. I'm taking these from actual D&D, so these exist. And somewhere in the heart of Candelure, the Fey Gate was brought back by that crazy guy. Jericho destroys the gate right after it brought forth this demonic aspect of this long-forgotten deity. And Jericho is able to weaken. I skipped a part. So Jericho destroys the gate, but there's this monstrous evil deity or aspect of a deity loose. Aravir is actually beaten by Grazd, the demon. So Aravir's dead. Jericho is able to actually fight him and weaken him enough to send him back to the abyss. But at this point, there's a lot of hell basically raised or set loose on Candelure. And at this point, that evil, long-forgotten deity, the aspect, is still out there, and Jericho knew he didn't have the strength to defeat it. So he actually hides the Jericho blade, because if it fell into the wrong hands, big trouble. So he hides the Jericho blade, goes to fight the aspect anyways, and dies. that is how the Jericho blade, one of the biggest magic items for my next campaign, was hidden. I'll talk about the story of the blade in another video. Araminthir basically rallies, joins what is known as the heroic, the good guys, along with the gnomes of Aldesta, and they're able to push back the bad guys. But Gras told Jericho before Jericho had defeated him, "You are too late. This is the dawn of the Everwar. There is no end." So this long-forgotten deity tries to attack one of the pillars of creation. Edoral, a moon elf warrior, sets up a surprise, stops him, but the deity is so evil, and I'll tell you who it is in just a second. This aspect of this supremely evil deity basically taints the blood of Edoral and his followers. So the moon elves at this point are split. There you have the moon elves, and then Edoral and his followers, who are basically referred to as the fallen elves at this point. They turn evil, they descend into madness, and they are banished from Kindara Thane. And yeah, they're split. So that is so far the ancient lore that I've come up with. That's how you get the split in a few different races, like the orcs, like the elves. And that puts together kind of the basis of how this area came to be. And then there's a lot of history up until when the campaign starts, but I'll get to that later. So we have some more questions. I want to get to those, and then we'll start with the world building exercise that I have in mind. Questions. One of the questions just disappeared. Whoever that was, if you want that question answered, go ahead and post it back up. I was just about to click on it and it's gone. So I don't know if he deleted it. We'll see. Let me refresh the comments section. Oh, what do we have? I'm not getting any more comments. So if there's just 3 comments, then we're good there. Okay, here comes the question. I'm gonna select it before it disappears. The moon elves in your campaign, are they almost like drow? They are considered fallen. Here's the deal. No, they're not. The drow actually live underneath that other continent, the Aralai Dominions, which the name comes from. There's a city called, I think it's Aralai Sinlu. I don't know how you actually say it. It's a hyphened word. It's one of the biggest drow cities in D&D lore. And it's actually in the Underdark book from 4th edition, which I have, but I won't show you because you won't be able to see anything. That massive city exists underneath that other continent. Because I like to pull stuff from actual D&D lore, as you probably recognized. I use real demons from it, real deities. Oh, I didn't tell you who that deity was. It is the chained god, the Elder Elemental Eye Tharizdun, which I believe he's the Temple of Elemental Evil, I believe is his thing. But I've always been fascinated by him. So anyways, he was that evil aspect that came about. And who was never defeated, by the way. It's not him, it's his aspect, but still. So the moon elves, they're going to look a lot like the regular, or the fallen elves are going to look a lot like the regular moon elves. But they're going to have crazy eyes, basically, and they're mad, most of them. They're going to have a few other racial traits changed, so a character could play a fallen elf, but they're going to have to give me a good reason and a good backstory for it. But I should say the moon elves and the fallen elves they're basically wood elves. If you picture, like Jack and Daxter is my best example. Jack is kind of like an elf thing. I don't remember. I played all those games, but I don't remember the actual story. Basically, he, with those huge pointy ears, that's what you're looking at with the moon elf or the fallen elves. They look a lot like Jack from Jack and Daxter. They're wild. They're much different than the Eladrin, who are very civilized. They do have moon elf like civilizations, obviously, but they're extremely I mean, you never know if you can actually trust them. That's why the kingdom of men and dwarves refused at first to have an alliance with them. They're very in tune with powerful and wild magic, and very in tune with the wild, the forests. And so if you met one in a forest, so if you walk up and an Eladrin walks up to you in a forest, you might be hesitant, but more than likely, unless it's an outright evil person, it'd probably talk to you before attacking you, if they ever did. Whereas a moon elf probably thinks that you are an evil creature coming into their forest. And so they may not be outright evil, but they might draw a blade and start attacking right away. Not a lot of talking might happen with them. Basically consider them very wild, a very wild civilization. And along with the fallen elves as well. So drow exist, the fallen elves exist, the moon elves exist, and then the Eladrin. The high elf, I think they put the Eladrin in the Dungeon Master's Guide, or at least a couple of things to make one. The high elf for me is just nothing. There's nothing unique enough that I could do with it. I like Eladrin more, and so I basically just swapped those out. So I don't have high elves, I have Eladrin. The moon elves and the fallen elves are based off of the wood elf, so they'll have similar stats, but a couple different changes. And then the drow, like I said, which are drow. Evil. So I hope that answers that question. The world building exercise we'll get to. Continue to post questions though, because I'll try my hardest to answer them when I see them. But we're going to do a world building exercise with one of the kingdoms. We're going to jump into, sorry, let me get the right map here. You know what? This is not scripted at all. This is just kind of us hanging out. So we'll let you guys pick. Whether you are in, and I see another question here I'll answer, but whether you're in the comments, whether you are in the Q&A app, I'm going to run through the kingdoms. I'm going to say the name of each in a quick sentence, and then I want you to pick one. And then we're going to do the world building exercise in that kingdom. So, and I'm just going to pick a random one from a comment. So, from the kingdom map, up in the yellow, you have Alheim, the ancient kingdom of dwarves and men. You have Aramanthir, which is basically, it's going to have the most dragonborn. It's a lot of humans, some elves, dragonborn, tieflings, but this is basically where the dragonborn ended up after their failed invasion. Arathel is a lot of mixed races. You have a lot of half-elves, again, a lot of dragonborn, very close ties to Aramanthir, obviously since they're right by each other. Kindara Thane, your elves, your moon elves, your Eladrin, all there. Amistir, which is where the fallen elves were basically exiled to. Stormfall, that's the humans who left Alheim to free the gnomes when they were enslaved. Alheim didn't want to go, but a big contingency of people did want to free the gnomes. They ended up with their own kingdom named Stormfall. And then you have Aldesta, which is the gnomes. Very close ties, obviously, to Stormfall, who helped free them. They actually helped, these humans found Stormfall. So go ahead and pick one. I'm going to answer a few questions real quick, but the first kingdom I see, that's the one we're using. Could I join you in a hangout? In the hangout, I'm very interested in your setting, and I don't want to bog down Q&A with my questions. I have an HD webcam and mic. I'll tell you what, stick around afterwards, and we will talk. I don't know if I can get in a hangout yet, but we'll set one up if we can't do it right now. So stick around. Yes, we will be able to do that. Probably just not during this stream. Oh, let's see. Stormfall, first one I saw. Okay, so we're in Stormfall. Now, remember, I want each of you to do this in your setting. So pick a kingdom, pick an area with what I'm about to do, try to do it in relation to your setting as we're doing this. So we had a lot of different people actually picking here. But yeah, we're going to do Stormfall. So while I'm setting up, obviously, Marpaz, your question, what's the biggest threat to Candelure? That is going to be the aspect of Tharizdun still exists in Candelure. The wild, which is like those crazy orcs, gnolls, dragonborn, all the crazy bad guys, they still exist. They're over in the Erli Dominions. So they are another threat as well, but there is no other setting or no other big kingdom outside with any major threat of coming in. So now remember the history. We're doing Stormfall. So the history of Stormfall is that those were the guys, those are the humans, a couple dwarves who left Alheim to free the gnomes. The Dragonborn had enslaved the gnomes. Alheim is very proud, they're kind of a-holes, honestly. But they didn't want to go save them, so these humans left. They were told not to come back. They free the gnomes. The gnomes have a lot of technology based on magic and help them set up their own kingdom right there. So the landscape you're looking at, they're guarded by some mountains, rivers, basically a mountains one side, coast on the other, and they're in that huge valley. The size, real quick. Oh, you're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 300 miles, roughly. Now, 60. Actually, it's only about 200 miles between the mountains and the coast. 150 to 200, but it's a lot longer. So you're looking at maybe 800 miles, the full length. So let's get started. The exercise is we're going to build a town. We're going to build a town in this kingdom, and I'm going to take you through the steps. I've done this in the past. My steps don't change a whole lot, but I want you to follow and build a small town, not taking a lot of time doing it because you don't need to. You don't need to take a lot of time. I'm going to show you really quickly in 10 minutes how we can come up with a great setting or a great town. Okay, so on my clock here, it's 1:59. By 2:10, we're going to have this town hammered out. I'll pull this up here. And I'm going to screen share here. So open a document, open a Word document, open Google Drive doc, get out pencil, pen, paper, however you want to do it. I'm going to do this on my Obsidian Portal wiki page because that's where it's going to have to be anyways. And I will do a whole different video on Obsidian Portal and how I use it and how you can use it. Okay, here comes a screen share. All right, so as you can see, this is my wiki page for, this is the cities wiki page is what I called it. So these are the current names of cities and places where they're located. Only a few of them are actually detailed out, and I will tell you right now, Stormfall, they're just the names. They might have a concept, so we're going to click on one, and we're actually going to see. Let's do Newman. Okay, so for Newman, I have a picture. That's the only thing I have for Newman right now. I like to start cities and towns with a single idea. Most of the time, it's cool fantasy artwork that I found online, like right here. That's the original concept that I'm going to go off of. But you can see this is what I fill out. We're going to start, we're going to come up with a population, government, defense, commerce, organizations, and nearby places. Notice there's 3 bullets after that. I always recommend for every town, city, village, whatever, that you come up with 3 interesting things nearby. So on Obsidian Portal, this is how I edit. So I apologize if this looks confusing. This goes into kind of the Obsidian Portal editing screen, which is not confusing at all, actually. It just looks like it. So for population, I want to put a bullet point. Now, going straight out of the Dungeon Master's Guide for 5th edition, because that's the system I will use to run this, I know that Newman is actually a city. It is not a town. It is basically, a city is going to be anywhere above 6,000 residents up to 25,000. This is not a big city. It's a small city. There's about, I want to say, between 8 and 10,000. So I'm going to pick just a completely random number in there because you can always change it later. 9,227. This includes some farmsteads right outside the city. Type of government. I'm going to do a bullet point again. Governments are kind of a different thing. Within Stormfall, you do have a monarchy. You have a king, essentially, but he works very, very closely with elected officials. So it's kind of a mixed batch, I guess. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say that. Okay, so we're talking government in this town. So Stormfall overall, like I said, has a king. He works very close with a council of representatives. The reason for this, they wanted to keep their traditional roots from Alheim, which is a king. But the gnomes, I told you, are very progressive, almost to a democracy. So the people here have to speak. The gnomes helped these guys a lot after they helped the gnomes. So they don't want to infringe on that. They don't want to plop down a monarchy right next to a democracy, or a budding democracy is what I call it. So what we've got here within this specific town, Newman is actually where the king is located. So overall, for this town, king is in charge. Another bullet point. This is also where his small council resides. So he's got a small council of elected officials. Okay, but since they're running the entire kingdom as well, there is also a city council of elected officials. To take care of the needs of the city, because the king can't always focus on just the city. He's got a whole kingdom. Same for the small council. So city council of elected officials. Now to put some more details, I'm going to say that on the king's small council of elected officials, there are 6. The city council is actually going to have 10 elected officials. Keeping those numbers even because the king has got the final say. He's that odd man out, so there can't be an even vote on a lot of things. Defense of a city. And this is what I used from basically the 4th edition Dungeon Master's Guide to build towns. This is the setup that I used, and they actually carried it straight over into 5th edition. This is a lot of what they talk about. So we obviously see by the picture, which I think is all the way down here. Nope, it's not going to show it. Okay, so we know that there's a wall. So a big defense of this city. City wall. And it's guarded. We've got a city guard at this point. No, actually, we're going to not overcomplicate things. This is where the king's army resides. Obviously, he can call upon people from a lot of different towns in the kingdom when he needs them, but the full-time soldiers are here. So they take shifts. as the city guard. There's no reason to spend more money to also have a city guard. If these guys aren't at war, they're not doing anything, they can guard this city since it's where they're stationed. So we're going to have city wall guarded by Stormfall soldiers. Very simple. I'm going to leave it at that. We're moving right along. Commerce. This is an area where I say pick a couple of different things that they can produce a lot of. So here, this kingdom is going to have a lot of fish. This is one of the towns that is actually along a river. And this one might actually be along the ocean too. But fish is a big thing they're going to be able to provide. They cannot provide a lot of lumber, but being next to the mountains, they can provide a lot of, whoa, what happened? Stone. Fish, stone, and let's think of one more thing that they can provide a lot of. I'm actually going to say salt. So those are what they provide a lot of. Not going to talk a lot about what's coming in at this point, just what they have a lot of. So these items here are going to be a lot cheaper because they're sending these out to a lot of different places. Organizations, just come up with a couple. Once again, standard rule of 3 suits you well. You don't have to go crazy with it, but also don't just put one organization. You want to have a few other things. So while I'm going to start with 3, there's actually going to be a lot more in this city. So number 1, there's a merchants guild. That's where a lot of this trade is going to be centered. But in Stormfall, I'm going to have this group basically called. Now, I encourage you to write down the first thing that comes to your mind. You can change it later. I don't like this name, but it's basically what this group is about. Freedom fighters. These are the guys. This kingdom was founded because they went after and freed slaves. So this group is going to maintain that tradition. They're going to keep their eye out for slavery, and they're going to fight for people's freedom. I'll rename them later and even put a note. Rename. The other group here, there's actually going to be a major group of gnomes here, gnome representatives. I'm going to put the Aldesta, the gnome kingdom, contingency. Moving on to nearby places, interesting places. So you're going to have an area actually up in the mountains, which is going to be an orc hideout. I'll explain that in a minute. Orc hideout in the mountains. A wrecked brewery, basically in ruins. And the very last one, we're going to have an abandoned witch tower. Talk about those here in a second. Boom. It's 2:10 by my clock. And we have an interesting little city with the basics that are needed, and we can always add on to it, but that we have the framework. So population, you won't usually need to reference, but you do want a number. So we've got that king who can be named at any time. You don't have to worry about that right now. Small council of his elected officials, there's 6 of them. City council of elected officials who take care of this city in particular when the king can't. Defense, city wall guarded by Stormfall soldiers. Commerce, they produce a lot of fish, stone, and salt. Organizations, they have the Merchants Guild, very strong here. The Freedom Fighters, who will be renamed, and the Aldesta Contingency, a representative of gnomes, who are basically the trade between the two. They represent the gnomes and the relationship between Stormfall and Aldesta. Nearby places, the orc hideout in the mountains. There is an orc that I posted on the PhD&D Facebook page. Let me actually stop the screen share. And I'll pull his name up real quick. I posted this orc, and he's kind of a loner. There he is. It's easier to access him on the Facebook page. So his name is Ron Duke. Ron Duke is the overlord of the Broken Stone tribe, which is in Kandalur. He despises Groomsh, which makes him a target among other orc tribes, yet everyone has failed to bring him down. He's searching for a dark ritual that will infuse him with demonic powers, and he has vowed to set the West on fire. Now, what that means, the West is essentially Stormfall and the region right near it. And so this orc hideout nearby is not him, but it is one of his outer ranging groups. So that ties this interesting city location to another interesting location and a bigger storyline. Then we talked about the wrecked brewery. So this brewery has been abandoned. It was a large, almost like a plantation style. They produced a lot of fine ales and things, and they are at this point, it's wrecked, it's ruined. Why? We don't know. We don't need to know right now as the Dungeon Master, but you have an interesting location, and you can come up with a bunch of random rumors around town, around Newman, as to what that is or why it's abandoned. Same with the abandoned witch tower. It doesn't even have to actually have witches in it. It could, but everyone knows it's abandoned, and maybe they just call it a witch tower. But I gave each of those something. I didn't just say an abandoned tower. I gave it witch. I didn't just say a wrecked building. I said it was a wrecked brewery. You want to give it something that you can use as a theme to grow the rest of it, even if it's false, even if it's a rumor. And then the orc hideout in the mountains, that one was pretty generic, but at the same time I said orc, and I knew where that one was going. So you always want to tie it to something if you can. If you can't, at least have a singular theme, like the brewery or the witch, to go with it. So I'm going to do a quick sweep. That was, building a city. I hope you built cities. Post your examples in the comments, please, if you did this exercise, because I want to see them. I love the inspiration of seeing other people's world building as well. But I'm going to do a quick sweep of the comments, see if we have any questions. But that gives you an outline of a city very quickly. It gives you the major information that you need to improv smaller details that you might need to improv. Improv requires some preparation if you're going to be doing a lot of it. Now, some preparation doesn't have to be much. It can be exactly what we did, and you could improv almost every last thing in that city from that point on. I will do more, and hopefully in another live video, if not just in a world building video, we'll actually draw a city. We'll draw Newman. We will lay it out on a map. If I can get a good setup so you can watch me draw, we'll do it. If not, I'll just post a regular video for it. And yeah. So in the comments, what do we got here? Ham and Opie, if you're there, thanks for watching. I'm liking your stuff. Make a playlist. I do have a playlist for coffee and campaign building, but I don't know if it's in the right order. We'll try that. We'll see. And I don't know if you can rename videos. If you can, I should probably go do that, but I don't know. No questions yet in the Q&A app. We're going to wrap this up here within the next 5 to 10 minutes. So if you have anything else, now's the time to post a comment, tweet at me, comment on the Facebook page, the PhD&D page, comment, or post in the Q&A app if you want. Yeah. Any last questions, throw them out. Basically, at this point, what do I do with the setting? I continue to work on the smaller details. What we just did is going to be the bulk of what I do over the next month. It's going to be going through each of those cities that you saw on that Obsidian Portal Cities page, and it's going to be hammering out the loose structures. I am a world building DM. I love the detail, but you have to beware to not do everything. Let the players influence the game. Let the players build something if they want in the world, and leave a lot of space for the story to generate what it is. That abandoned witch tower or the abandoned brewery, those are perfect examples where you don't have to know that right away, and you might actually be inspired by something the players do or by something you improv. They talk to an NPC at the tavern. He says, "Oh yeah, that abandoned brewery was actually overrun by sprites, believe it or not." And all of a sudden you get to thinking, and you're like, "Oh crap, that could lead, why are sprites all the way out here? Maybe there's a problem in the forest, which is a long ways away." That's a weird example, but you see where I'm going with it. Let the story develop a lot of the world. Leave a lot of things undone. That's why that city and town framework works so well. That's why that's what they say in here to fill out, because you can always add to it. That's the thing. You can always add to it. It's much harder to take away from stuff you've already done. So just start small, and if you want to later on, add those details in. So I'll go through, I'll do all those cities. I will continue with more of the history. Hopefully I didn't bore you with that long history lesson there. I actually didn't intend on reading that. It's a very rough draft, but I felt like it would give you a good idea what I'm coming up with for the history. It looks like we have, okay, so we do have somebody who did the exercise and posted it. Marpaz Sopron, new booming town rich with ore and gold. There's talk of a strange material in the mines. 3 things to discover: the mine, the forgotten cemetery in a wooded area, and the temple of the toad in a cold swamp nearby. Perfect example of the framework. I especially like the temple of the toad in the cold swamp nearby. So you know where it is, but temple of the toad, it has a theme, it has a name. I don't know what it is. Maybe that he does, or he or she does as a DM. Maybe they don't. That's perfect. That is an awesome example. Thank you for posting that. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this video. Again, I'm going to stay on here for just a few minutes. So I don't have a huge rush to get it out of this, but by about 2:30, I do need to be completely wrapped up. So I will try to do more of these in the future. It's really hard, as you can see. This is my new apartment. Me and my girlfriend live here, and this is like the main room of the apartment. So like this is a living room. The camera is up high enough so you can't see the mess on the floor. But there's really no other, it's a single bedroom. There's not really room in there to film, and there's not room in there to put a desk. And so I kind of have to almost have the whole place to myself to even film, because otherwise there's just a lot of distractions. There's just too much going on in one area to film a lot of times. So I have the next few days off. I'm going to pump out as many videos as I can, not just for quantity, but I have a lot of what I think quality ideas. I'm going to at least get them filmed over the next few days and get those out. But the world building series that I've been promising forever is going to be here. You're going to have the first video within the next 2 weeks. I promise that. It's gonna be out. I've put a lot of work into it. I've refilmed a lot of it, and a lot of editing. Basically, I wanted to include certain things, and then I would get more ideas and be inspired to do something else. So a lot of that's filmed. It's just putting it together. So you will have the first in the revamped world building series within the next 2 weeks. I did a world building series before, which you can check out on my channel. I still stand by everything that I filmed there. I love world building enough that I want to do another run of videos on it. So yeah, my setup, my kind of world building setup that I have now it's a stand-up desk. Real quick. I've basically got like a bar stool that I can stand at, but it's a standing desk, which I was inspired by the Healthy Gamer on YouTube. He doesn't do anything. He doesn't post videos anymore, but he had a standing desk, and I actually saved up and bought it. I like it a lot, but it has a ton of space. I'm going to see if I can show. Well, not really. Oh, that's my new keyboard, though, by the way. Anyways, you want to have a good setup. I've talked about that in the past, but this allows me a ton of space to set up. Like I've got a stack of the core rule books here. I've got another stack with the maps. Oh, and some stuff I was going to show you real quick. The adventure building binder. I'll be doing a live stream sometime Friday about the new year. And here's just a quick sneak preview of that. I won't say anymore. Things that I use actually, like physical products to record or to world build. Moleskin notebooks. They're a little pricier, but I love writing in them. Don't even know why. It's a great material to write on. And so I got a pack of 3. They are the tiny grid. And you can see that's where I'm going to draw like dungeons. That's where I'm going to draw individual locations. This is where I would draw like the brewery, that abandoned brewery, or the witch tower. It'd be in that moleskin notebook. I have a black one with a little band here. This one is blank pages, no grid. This is where I do city layouts. This is where I will draw the actual city to keep them all in one place. And then I have a big one I got for free, a larger moleskin. This is all brainstorming. You can see I wrote in Dwarven there. It says Hammered On, which is in Candelure. Planning for another city. I'll show you here. Leolar. Just writing down those main things again. What we went through. This is a city in Kendara Thane. It's the head of the Moon Elves. Population 22,728. Government, elders. It's run by a council of elders. Defense, city guard, and each noble house within the city has its own guard. Commerce, major trade from Aldesta, Stormfall, Arethel, and Alheim. Not so much with Amistir or Aramanthir because they harbor dragonborn scum, is what these people would say. Leolar produces a lot of lumber, being in the forest, but they're very stingy with it. They don't like to tear down their forest. Organizations, the Moonwraiths, Shadow of the Moon, Merchants Guild, and the Guild of the Night. But it's just another example of that framework. So, one last refresher here on comments. I think we've answered everything. Hopefully you've enjoyed the stream. I don't have any in the Q&A app. I don't think I have any on Facebook, but it won't load. So I'm going to go ahead and just wrap it up there. I want to thank you for tuning in to Coffee and Campaign Building with me, PhD&D, here on YouTube. We got some more good stuff coming out very, very soon. Like I said, there's going to be a live stream on Friday, and kind of like this, but talking about some other topics. So I would love to get maybe a couple people in that. If it works, I will post in the YouTube RPG Brigade on Facebook to kind of tell you the time. I want to start the stream by myself, just going over kind of what you're going to see in 2015 from the channel, and then just go into a hangout with some guys. So guys or gals. So I'll post in the RPG Brigade about that. And yeah, there's that. If you have any other questions, leave them in the comments. Thanks again for watching. I will try to get to all the comments if you do have further questions. And whoever left that comment earlier about getting in a hangout, go ahead, and if you have Facebook, go to the PhD&D Facebook page and either write on the wall or send me a message, or email dmprofessor227@gmail.com. And I'll try to put that in the description as well. And we can set up and talk about what you want to talk about. So this has been Coffee and Campaign Building with PhD&D. I want to thank you again for watching, and I will talk to you all soon. See you in the next video. And Happy New Year.